the degeneration of the muscles, it hurts. I mean, I can feel it. I mean, much less losing the abilities. I liken it to being, some wild or lion tiger stuck in a cage. It's like I remember the Serengeti, I just can't run across it anymore. It's a condition called Friedrich's ataxia. Um, one of it's genetic. That's how it's like bad genes have to line up. You have to be extremely unlucky. But two of the major symptoms are muscle degeneration, and my sense of balance is way off. Like even just now talking, I'm like feel like I'm almost on a roller coaster. It's like the world never stops moving, and it can be literally nauseating. That's part of the reason why I'm so skinny
Mm.
is because I just don't have an appetite. Thankfully, I've always been sort of someone of the mind, and this sounds pretentious, but I mean, I enjoy like just thinking and reading and that kind of activity. And but that said, the losing one's ability to literally just walk, it changes your whole perception on life and what's important and how you go about it. It's funny because I mean it's inspiring for me to go out in go into big crowds, and it does my heart good because 97, 98% of the people that I come into contact with are understanding and careful and thoughtful. And I mean, admittedly, it's partially the places I go to. Usually, those are the kind of people I want to be around anyway. But it's a great help to me. It keeps me going. It inspires me, and pardon my bad draw, but dude, I love live music. It really, I mean, I always have, and it's a very much elevates my spirit, and I know it might. Well, I mean, I'm sure you're aware of the number of studies that have been done in the psychiatric departments, different universities that music has actual tangible effect on one's well-being, one's sense of things, and for me, it's very much the case. Without music, without literature, um, I don't know what I would be doing. And that's why I brought up the thing of like being creature of the mind, because a dear friend of mine, very outdoorsy type, um, like bike riding, canoeing, all that kind of thing. And he was like, we were just talking. He's like, John, I'm not sure how I'd be able to deal with not being able to go bike riding,
Mm.
not being able to canoeing, because so much of his identity, I mean, that's what he does. That's who he is. And you know, I I mean, don't get me wrong. I enjoy like being out and about and doing things, and I miss dancing like you wouldn't believe. But you know, God, so it sounds so pretentious, but I think of like Nelson Mandela being in a prison cell for over 20 years, and when he's been asked about it, just like, but my body was in the cell, but my mind remained free. And
Mm.
it sounds goofy as hell almost, but I'm telling you, it's kind of true. It's like when sorry, body, but when I'm able to get out of my body, so to speak, it's a wondrous place to be because, I mean, having a crippled physical shell, I don't recommend it. It's no fun. And the humor, I've always, try to see the humor and stuff. The very dark sense of humor, but I mean, let's face it, it's also I use it to kind of keep the demons at bay, right?
Yeah.
Because with that, it's easy to get very hopeless, you know. It's easy to, metaphorically eat my own arms off if
Mm-hmm.
I'm not careful. And that's where, again, it sounds so silly, but it's really true. It's like, the sunrise in the morning, golly, that's beautiful, and I'm just glad that even through physical pain that I can see that, perceive that, and just know that, again, I'm not trying to sound goofy, but I feel connected to my fellow human because we all see the sun,
Mm-hmm.
and most of us go, "Wow, that's pretty," or or what have you, and that connection, it means a lot to me. I've spent most of my life trying to make connections with people, but I've always like pulled back out of fear. And frankly, and again, it sounds dramatic, but living on borrowed time because I'm fortunate to still be alive, if that makes sense. And it's really I don't have time to be afraid, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
And so a lot of my inhibitions have gone away. They've crumbled. They've lessened because I maybe even more than someone that's doing all right physically. I need that connection, and it keeps me going. And funnily enough, I'm just rambling on here. I recognize that, but
No, you're good.
I've been misanthropic. I don't really trust other people. I don't, their motivations. I don't know what they're, But as I've gotten more and more incapable, shall we speak, yeah, I'm just amazed by there are a lot of really good people out there,
Mm-hmm.
and weirdly, this condition has shown that to me much more than when I could walk around and go, "What a dick," what have you,
Yeah.
Now it's a little different. So
Yeah. You have a kid,
right,
and you had this kid before this ever happened.
correct.
So you were married at one point. Tell me a little bit about John before Friedrich's ataxia.
I was, and it was a true calling. I was really, I was a school teacher, and I worked with middle school age boys that have been physically and or sexually abused. So I taught all subjects, but a lot of what I was doing is just to get them to be able to trust another human again. But still learn how to be critical and be safe and not I mean the kids went from boys that were entirely withdrawn to like hardly ever said a word to others that you know Billy did not stab him with a pencil today. It was a
Mm.
good day, Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
exactly. So it was very. I was very committed to trying to help others. And it actually is a factor. I'm the first, including my brother. I'm the first male in my father's family since 1843 to not join the military
Wow.
for at least age. So there is a long standing sense of service and giving back. And as a white guy growing up in America, I was growing up privileged, frankly. I mean, I'm even a Protestant, you know?
You're what?
A Protestant,
Protestant,
as
yeah.
opposed to a no offense to Catholics, but I mean, you know, it's like, as my dad would always joke, it's like, John, this entire society is set up for people like you. Don't be a jerk about it, you know? And that was his way of saying, you know, to be thankful, try to give back. And that's one thing that I've always been, it's always gotten under my skin where, you know, there's people that, you know, I was dealing with children whose uncle would routinely rape them. And I had to deal with people that are bitching because they had to wait 5 seconds for their phone to come on. And it's like, it could be worse. I promise it could be worse. But so, I'll put it like this. I was much more a person with running into a burning building. Now I find myself, I'm the guy trapped in the burning building. So it's really difficult to go from like being designed to give, so to speak, to, from my point of view, needing so much. And it's really, it's difficult because my ego, it's like, it feels really good to help people, I find. And go from that to now where I have to ask for everything, basically, it's I'm not gonna lie, it's very tough. I don't appreciate it. It is, I got, I've had this for about 16 years and gotten worse and worse. And it's only in the last couple of years that I'm starting to finally get comfortable with like getting your help button on the microphone. 4 years ago, I would have made this all wait while I figured out how to, you know.
Yeah.
It's like, John, don't do that, you know. And
Well, that's a really challenging thing, even for me. Um, I have a hard time asking for help with, you know, things that, in a weird way, more of the internal things, right? Like,
right,
I don't have a problem asking someone like, hey, can you help me with this food recipe? Like, I've never made it before, or whatever. But it's like, if I'm feeling sad and I want someone to listen to me, it's like,
see,
that's,
I still so struggle with that because as I used to, but I'm so used to being on the other side of the desk, so to speak. You know, I was like, Mr. C is what I was called, you know, clerk. It's my name. And I really, it meant a lot for me to be there with the kids, the boys, you know, and it was just, it felt very good to be there for them. But I never would share with them any of my issues. And I got into the really bad habit of still, I mean, the ataxia is, it sucks. I don't like it, obviously, but I would still have the same problems opening up and asking for internal help, as you put it. I struggle, and you know, I bring up with the military. It's like, you know, military leaders, you show no weakness, none. That's how you survive combat. You don't show weakness, and that was drilled into my head. And so, even if I was dying inside, you know, emotionally, I wouldn't tell you, not because I was even afraid as much as like I shouldn't do that, you know, because that's not what leaders do. And I'm a leader, you know, or at least not a follower, right? And it's
not manly.
exactly, yeah, very much. And that's one thing, frankly, that I didn't even realize I was tapping into until much later. Um, and frankly, Nick, it's only been the last couple of years I've come to realize just how, sorry, Dad, how violent my upbringing was. It's like my ex-wife and I, when we would argue, she would think, and she was totally right. It was like the really mean arguments. I could go for the jugular, not literally, but the way I grew up, it's like unless you had a broken nose or you lost a tooth, you didn't have a fight. You were just talking loudly, and that's not. Thankfully, most people don't grow up with that kind of mentality where unless you're literally physically attacked by someone, it's not a quote unquote real fight. And that really is something that I'm still trying to come to terms with. Because as my role as a teacher, I can put it all aside and hear, their parameters, and I was very professional and, acted accordingly. But in my private life, I could just be just mean, and I wasn't even aware of it, because comparatively, again, when you're brought up where like, unless you're bleeding and bleeding badly, you're fine, and that's a very emotionally empty way to live. And again, so much, my wife, in May 22nd, it'll be 3 years. It's early April right now since she left. And it's only been the last couple of years that I've come to realize just how little I thought I was giving so much, but I was only giving a little bit. Which brings me to what you were saying, the vulnerability that you're showing to say, hey, I struggle with even pointing out that I'm feeling sad or bad about something. I'm starting to realize that, John, you live your life like you're at war. You're living your life like you're in the middle of an actual conflict.
Yeah.
Well, if you look at things like that, like not having enough milk, I mean, it's nothing. I mean, as long as you're alive, nothing else matters. Well, that's great, maybe if you're actually in a war zone. But if you're a civilian just, going to get milk and eggs, no one wants to live that way, And God bless her, my wife, she is like, after, we're still great friends, and she's like, John, I always saw you as nihilistic because nothing really seemed to matter to you. It's only after all of and we were together 34 years.
Wow.
It's after all this time that I realized that you were just trying to put things into perspective. Unfortunately, your perspective is you're in a war.
Right.
Constant fight, constant battle. I mean, like literally, And so uh, it's great in small doses. I wouldn't want them to have lived with me, because
So what she was trying to say is, I guess, like if she was having difficulty with something, you would put it into perspective by saying
I would discount everything
because it's not a war zone.
Yeah, it's like,
Right.
oh, please, that's a first world problem if I ever heard one. She's like, John, I'm reaching out to you. I'm struggling with this. And all you're doing is saying, well, you shouldn't struggle. You're not even acknowledging that I feel this way. And ironically, with my kids, I shouldn't say my kids, but with my students, I wasn't like that at all. I was like thoughtful and caring and giving, and I said I love you to them, and I called them gentlemen, and but that was my job, right? I was doing them a service in this, very known, place, known situation. Whereas with my poor wife, it's like I would just got any kind of struggle she's going through, and that's no way to be.
Yeah, and it's kind
So,
of ironic that part of the fear, or part of the reason you didn't open up is because that's not manly enough or that's not this enough. And so here you are kind of pointing that out to someone else that's opening up to you. And it's, I mean, I've done the same thing in past
you're
relationships.
gonna make me cry, and that's a good thing, actually. But yeah, no, it's not funny, but I agree with you totally. It's like in fact, I'll bring up my son too, because he's brought it up how hard it is to talk with me because I discount so many issues. And then you add in, well, no, I'm a guy in a wheelchair.
Mm,
Now I have all these things, and it's like, really? You're going to complain to me about how
mm,
hard things are? So it's like, as my ex-wife used to always put it, like, no matter what occurred, you were going to always win the argument of who has it worse,
mm.
and it's like, no, why I always went there, I don't, well, I do know why, but it was like an easy way to not deal with other people's feelings on my own, very much like, yeah, yeah, yeah,
Yeah, it's a reminder of, in some ways, like your relationship with your father, and probably not being able to open up to him very much, or
no,
being
no,
reprimanded and told shut
to-
the fuck up, you know?
very much, weakness was not tolerated.
Yeah,
You know who shows weakness? Weak people show
yeah,
weakness. There's none of this like, no, if you open up and you're honest and you talk about your feelings, that's manly. That's being strong. Not the way I was raised. That's like feelings can be manipulated.
mm,
Feelings can be used against you. So logically don't have feelings.
yeah,
Which
or don't
is,
show them at least.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
Of course you have feelings, but I was taught to suppress feelings, not examine them, not try to work it out or, come to a conclusion, deal with my trauma, anything like that. It was very much a, like, sneering, that's, what little weak men do. They
mm-hmm.
have to address their feelings, whereas badasses like us, we don't need that. It's,
Yeah,
okay, is that why you died alone, Dad?
yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Yeah, I grew up it was just me and my dad, actually. My brother is 11 years older, and he had already moved out. And, like, yeah, after years of trying to get close to my dad, I gave up because, and I internalized that sense of, like, you know, only we people ask for help. Only we people go, I don't know what to do here.
Mm.
It's like I was literally taught. I was taught better to make a bad decision than no decision. It's like
Yeah,
I incorrect.
yeah,
My father was a lawyer after he got out of the Navy, and he worked really hard, and he helped people, and he could turn around and just surprise you by his openness and vulnerability, but that would last like 30 seconds, and then we'd go back to like, oh my God, what have I said to my son? I'm going to turn him into some kind of, you know, foo foo hippie type, And
yeah.
yeah, I always joke with friends where it's like, do you always, do you wonder who were the people that suppressed like hippies and people fighting for voting rights and things in the 60s, that would be my family. No, seriously.
Yeah.
It's like the reason I brought up the Catholics and being raised Protestant, like my dad, it's like, you know why we didn't vote for Kennedy in the 60s, son? Catholic. No, I mean, seriously, and it was like, wow,
Wow.
yeah, but that said, obviously it had a massive impact on me, and some of it's good, believe it or not, but over the years, I tried to create this image that wasn't real of my father, and it's like, I wouldn't bring up all the negative aspects of what I was taught. Instead of saying I was taught to never show weakness, I would put it as I was taught to always try to find a way to deal with the situation,
Mm.
which sounds a lot better than don't be weak, but that was me trying to make sense of how I was treated. And in hindsight, I was not treated with a lot of love. Again, you sucked it up, and as long as you were still alive, that was good enough. And it's a weird thing because part of me, it's like I look at people that are like nothing, they can't make any kind of decisions, and everything is they're anxious about everything, they're afraid. And all jokes aside, my heart goes out to them, but it's like, God, come on. You know, have you had food every day? Yes. Have you had shelter every day? Yes. Have you had clothes every day? Yes. Everything else we can negotiate. In some ways, growing up that way is a good thing, if you know what I mean. But at the same time, when it would lead to sneering, and I mean, I hurt good people, Nick. They would reach out to me and I would shoot them down for being weak. Not wow, they're showing real strength to open up to me. It was like I would use that against them. I have a lot of regret. I wish I could say, yeah, I've always been a great person, and I've always been thoughtful and kind. And no, other than my job, which I was like almost a different person, um, I have a lot of regret. I hurt a lot of people needlessly because they they didn't see the world like I did, and my role was extremely black and white. Either you were strong or you were weak. Period.
Yeah.
There was no like, well, some days are better than others. Nope. You're either strong or you're weak, which is absurd.
Yeah. But on one hand, I think that's, at least for me, that's a lot more real. And I admire you for sharing all of this because it's, I just recently saw the Christopher Reeves documentary.
I haven't seen that yet.
And the whole movie is just, oh, he was a great guy, he was an amazing actor, this and that. And it's like, was he
Right.
was he yelling at his kids every now and then? Like, what's the catch?
Right.
And I don't think anyone's perfect, and so it would be a lot easier for you to say, I used to be this incredible giving person, and now look at me now. Oh, the bad luck, bro. Right? Like, it's
Right.
like, no, I was kind of a shitty person at times, and I wasn't always a shitty person, but I had my dark side, and this thing happened that it's not like this, just perfect arc.
And this sounds again, I don't mean in a pretentious way, but for whatever reason, I've always been leery of my ability to see it. But always looking for the truth, if that makes sense.
Mm.
And not shaping things to where, I come off as, oh, I was great, and now I do the best I can with this horrible life. I mean, I do, but
Yeah, yeah.
for me to just I just it sounds goofy, but I'm finally, I can't believe I'm even saying this. See, if my father was alive, I'll be honest, I don't even know if I can say this, but I try to let love lead me, if that makes sense. And
You try to what?
let love be my guide.
Oh
Like,
yeah. You said you wouldn't say this if your dad was alive because he'd probably smack you.
yeah, no, it's like, what? What kind of mission is that? That's no mission. What's the objective, son? Love? Wrong! You see, it's hard to go. He wasn't that bad, but yeah, he was pretty awful.
Yeah.
But it one thing that I and I'm just going off here a bit, that it's like, for me, home is people, not a place. I mean, I live here. This is a home. I'm very familiar. I love living here, etc. It's just a house. My ex-wife, she is home.
Mm.
Yes. And does that mean I never go home? It does. Does that break my heart? It does. Do I know what to do about it? Not really.
But if people are home, then that means you're also home or a home. Maybe you haven't found the keys to get inside there, but
It's
you.
true. I'm going to keep looking, and it's funny. You're really impressed by your astuteness. I mean that. Over the last few years, like, I'm a bit unshaven, a bit slovenly right now, but like, I'll go out and I'll joke with my dear friend Steve. It's like, man, I want to go out one night that doesn't end with some beautiful woman holding my hand going, "You're so brave." It's
Mm.
like, I don't want to be brave. I want to get laid. So I joke because even when, for one thing, I'm horribly out of practice, but like when women show me attention or they're flirting with me, there's a part of me that just pulls back almost automatically, even though I'm single, and
Because of your ex-wife and that
right.
you don't feel like you've kind of fully moved into the identity of single.
I have not. I'm trying to, but it's very difficult because I still think of, like, I'm cheating on my wife.
Right.
I'm not, obviously, but that's what it feels like, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I remember after, I think it was not my last girlfriend, but my ex before her, there was like a period of 3 to 6 months after the relationship where I didn't go anywhere that wasn't, like the grocery store
Right.
or what I needed, because I was so afraid of seeing her somewhere in public. And, what if I go spend time with a friend of mine that happens to be a girl and she sees me with her and she thinks, what if someone else sees us and I was just this weird kind of like, I'm trying to honor this person that doesn't, need me to do that anymore.
I hear you. It gets more complicated for me because she and she had a one night stand with her girlfriend. They are now together. A friend of mine is now her girlfriend. So there was this whole,
While you guys were together?
well, only at the end. That's what brought her. But it's like, the woman, the person I love my life itself, and I really love life. uh, what really, I mean, selfishly, her not being there breaks my heart. I miss her. I miss her laugh. I miss the way she moves. I mean, I could go on and on. But what really breaks my heart is that this woman I loved so much was never really herself the entire time we're together. And it's a weird, like, backhanded compliment, but I think it's a compliment. You know, she was like, John, if you weren't such a, ironically, if you weren't such a decent man, I would have left years ago, you know, but
What do you mean she wasn't being herself? Because she is now into women?
yeah,
Do you think that was what she was into the whole time? Or is that what she told you? Or
yes, too. She told me, and it was the kind of thing. It was like this long-standing, like there was a, you know, I'm getting not graphic, but very open here. As our sex life diminished, I assumed it was because of me. You know,
because of your condition?
exactly,
Uh,
and that was only part of it.
okay.
I come, and I want to make it real clear here, Nick, that like she could be totally heterosexual. We would have had issues. We would have had problems. We
Right.
might have even divorced. Because I'm not an easy human to be around. I'm not. You're sending me on my best behavior. But so I don't want to go, yep, you know, if she was a lesbian, she'd be here with me. You know, maybe not, right? But
yeah.
you know it.
Yeah. Have you ever thought of doing like stand-up comedy?
I haven't. But it's funny, people ask that because I have a twinkle in my eye and can get off a good one liner every now and then. And yeah, again, humor for me is something that it's like music and literature. It makes a very great world much more colorful to me. And you know, life's pretty absurd, and if you can't laugh at it, well, you hit your son.
Yeah.
So, and I'm just definitely not the kind of man I want to be or try to be for my one and only son. But the reason I'm bringing up about how it's not just because of sex. My son Mason and I are very close, but right now we're estranged, and part of it is he is finally getting a point where he's pointing out just how hard I could be without even realizing it. Just, you know, of course you made your bed. Of course you did your homework. Of course, you know, all these things where, like, other parents that, you know, be thrilled. I just, you know, that was the bare friggin' minimum, son. And I've come to realize just how hard that was on him. And I mean, he's excelled, and you know, some of the ways of thinking am not taking credit for, but I definitely helped learn taught him how to try to critically think, at least try to be objective, try to realize how subjective we are as humans. But again, I'm great. Are people like this is weird. I don't usually say this, but like I'll run into people and they're like, "Man, you're such an inspiration. You're great. And you're all this," and it's like, "Man, you've seen me for an hour.
Mm.
You know, just come back at 2 this morning. You'll see a very different person." And then not that different. I really don't change that drastic. You know, it's not like I pretend to be good and then I'm actually evil. I try to. I had a professor when I was 22, political violence in the modern novel as the class he taught.
Political violence in the modern novel?
Yeah.
Okay.
And he challenged me. We became friends over time because I definitely took university as that kind of like, this is when one asks questions. This is when one finds out who they are. You know, I took that liberal education thing quite seriously. And he goes, John, stop with the false decency, the self righteous decency, and just try to be decent. And that was when I was 22. I'm 57 now. And every day I just try to be decent. And it takes up a lot of my time because, you know, yeah, it's a weird thing. And I'll ask you a question. I'm curious to see what your answer will be. I derive pleasure from helping others, believe it or not. Again, I can be a jerk, but I truly derive pleasure from doing that. I is it okay to be? I struggle with finding the line between like not selfishness per se, but like self preservation because sometimes I don't want to say give too much, but it's like I find it easier to deal with other people's issues
Mm,
than deal with my own.
mm.
Do you ever have that
Oh yeah, I
problem?
mean, just it's 5 years of toxic relationships with women where I was trying to focus on them and fix their problems, and then but until my problems got so big that they exploded and destroyed the relationship. Um,
S- Sorry to hear that.
no, no, yeah, that's
Yeah.
I. But yeah, no, I think I don't know if I think with women in relationships, I definitely have that desire to be nurturing and to just help with whatever it is. But it does, if I'm not careful, it can cross the line into resentment of like almost like I'm resenting myself for not taking care of myself and just always taking care of what do you need? What do you and
Wow,
I'll just
it's
I'll
hard.
make up my my Uber hours next weekend. I'll just help them this weekend, and it's like I don't have a girlfriend right now, but if I did, I mean, um, and so yeah, like sacrificing a lot because this is where it gets tricky and layered. Is that I don't know how much of it is that I want to be nurturing and how much of it is that if I am nurturing, then they will like me and they will
Interesting.
want me to stick around and
Yeah.
they won't abandon me,
They
right?
they'll be forced to like me.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Um,
Interesting. Yeah. And so I was taught to not give, ironically. Or I mean, again, as a teacher, that was my job, and you took your profession dead serious.
yeah.
But when I get home, it's not like I surprised my wife with, hey, I cooked your special meal, or your favorite food. It's like, I think we're together 20 years before I even realized what her.
Mm,
She knew mine, the top five. I couldn't be bothered because I was very, very different. But, I was uber alpha male, and you're just lucky I'm around you.
mm,
Prove me wrong. You can't.
mm.
Awful, awful person. And yeah, I really have a lot of regret because that kind of twinkle in the eye humor, I can, I've learned over the years to back it up a lot faster, but I, I learned, unfortunately, to like pull people in and then find their weaknesses and just go and go and
Mm.
go. Why? Because I could. That's why.
Well, also, I can recognize that behavior in myself at times, and for me, it's been a way of and I don't even know if this was a conscious thing when I was doing it, but by pointing out flaws in this other person, you're kind of like, or I'm diminishing their sense of self worth, so that if you're this shitty person, then you need me. So
Wow.
it's a, kind of like a similar thing to what I was sharing, where it's about wanting to feel needed and wanting to feel like important in a way. I guess maybe that's not what was happening with
No,
you, but
no, no. I'm nodding because I'm thinking back to my ex-wife Julie, where like how much in embracement, or how much in hindsight she was trying to prove to me how much I needed her, and even though I could go, Julie, I love you more than life itself. I need you more than any other person in the world. You are home to me. That, and from my thinking, that said it all. Well, what would have been nice if I would have cooked that meal, or like, we were there 34 years. I didn't throw one surprise birthday party, not one. She threw probably seven, you
mm,
know, very, but it's the kind of hideous. See, I was taught and learned almost the other way, where, but the same kind of thing happens where you degrade someone's worth as a person, so they will need you more.
mm,
It sounds like our we ended up in the same place, but our methodologies might have been separate. It's like I wouldn't deign to be thoughtful towards you, but obviously a person like you is going to benefit from being around a person like me,
mm,
which is a horrible. I mean, there's a reason why my ex-wife thought I was nihilistic, and it wasn't just because I couldn't be.
right.
It was very, very dark, very, very unhealthy way of seeing connections with people. Um, and I actually mean this, and I'm still trying to figure it out, but I was brought up, and I got that from my older brother, who was also very violent, very mean. But it sounds absurd, but there is no innocence. There's only ignorance. Great. You know what finally made me realize the falsity of that statement? Our son was born, we had a home birth. And, long story short, he deliver him and cut the cord. And I was holding my son in my hand, one hand. And I'm 30 years old, right? And I went, oh, innocence, innocence. This infant, this newly born human, has no concept of anything. There is
Mm,
no context. None. And it finally hit me. I'm 30 years old, where again, I wouldn't. It's like, God, how could you be a teacher of these poor boys if that's how you thought? That's how I thought. That's how I behaved. And when I try to get with them, it's like to deal with what they're going through, to face it and to move on. For them, in the situation we found ourselves in, it was, according to my bosses, etc. I was good at what I did. For one reason, I was good. I was kind and gentle as a teacher, come on and be kind of like an ogre. But to finally recognize that John, cut people some slack. Like people have cut me slack. Maybe not my dad, but most people, right? And for me to really finally recognize, to not treat, if you don't know X, Y, and Z, that doesn't mean you're an idiot. It means you don't know X, Y, and Z. And that sounds so basic, but that was real breakthrough for me to not just assume if you didn't see something, you were dumb.
This whole wall is board games? No,
It
there's
is.
magazines and
But,
stuff.
but those are actual games.
The magazines?
Yeah, they,
Wow.
like, this is about the Allied intervention in the Russian Civil War. There's their map, there's the counters.
Wow.
Yeah, it's an interesting hobby. It's actually set up for solo play, and yeah, you just the better designed systems will like kind of put you in the moment and have to deal with that kind of situation. Like oddly, the Soviet commanders had to deal with their how difficult logistics could be, etc. So
So this puts you back in like the historical
yeah,
moment. Wow.
I'm a bit weird, I admit.
I don't think this is weird. I think this is cool.
Thank you. I would like to think that I would be thoughtful and kind without this condition, and I think I would be, but flat out, the ataxia has made me a more thoughtful, kinder person. And there's part of me that's embarrassed of like, I see, John. So it took you actually needing other people's help to finally make you not be such a jerk. And it's a little more than that. And I don't think that's not entirely true, but I have to face the reality that, as I have come to have to rely on people more and more, I've come to realize that that is not necessarily a weakness that I was trained to see it as. And again, seriously, I was brought up in a warfare footing. It's like leaders don't show weakness, they don't cry, they lead. That if you want to help people, be strong. So it was a weird kind of mixed message. It wasn't like I'm strong because I'm a badass and don't care about other people. It's like, no, I'm strong and badass because I care about other people. And this is how I show it. Which is kind of true, but not true either. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, and something that you said about needing help is what kind of like really is that what you needed in order to finally be kind. That reminded me my own experience with my relationships. I cheated on my first 3 girlfriends, and
I've been there. Years ago, I was in high school.
yeah.
No.
And my version of what you shared was like, I remember when I told the last girlfriend, just the look on her face was when I decided like this can never happen again. And it's like the same kind of thought was like really it took destroying someone emotionally for me to finally realize like, oh, maybe I shouldn't fuck with people's feelings in this way and be a little bit more considerate and honest.
Which is ironic because that's how we as people are so complicated. It's like I'm sitting there going, wait, I thought you were the guy that did everything for other people. It's like, it's like a meme, like charming and funny and all this is like, no, a dark, evil, mean person. It's like, no, you're not. Oh, yes, I. But same kind of thing, you know. It's like, God, I, I don't like to believe it, but it's a reality of that. I've come to realize that, at least I'll just speak for me, that I have a lot of impulses that don't necessarily all line up. You know, my impulse can be loving and kind and give you a shirt on my back. I can also have the impulse of, psychically destroy you as best I can. And it's not like a toss up either, but I can be either or.
Yeah.
And it's hardly what.
That's funny. That's not a toss up. It's like it's not 50-50. I'm not gonna.
Do I love that person or destroy their soul?
Yeah.
Flip a coin. Well, I can't flip a coin, but you know what I mean.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's funny because it reminds me of, I actually, when I was just starting to get the condition was starting. I used to be able to walk with the cane and got slower and I could, etc. These are back in the I could walk with the cane days, and I miss those days. No, but it was like a parent. It was parent teachers night at our son's elementary school, and I went in and I was limping and moving towards a chair, a desk near the front. And I swear this woman like beelines it to the chair that I was obviously going to and took a seat. And I had to admit I was mad. And I meant, excuse me, ma'am, seriously, I can't believe you just did that. I mean, I walked with a cane. I was coming towards the seat. Not sure what kind of person would do that to someone with a disability. And she looks at me and goes, well, I'm not that kind of person. It's like, okay, well then go, oh, well, I'm sorry, I didn't even realize that. Please take the seat. That. But it was like, wow, in her mind, she was a good person who would never do something like that. And I think it's really important for us to always remember, we can be that guy.
Yeah.
It's again not a toss up, but given the right circumstances, or you're hungry or tired, or all these little things add up to where you just lose it for this little person. All of a sudden, you know, she's the most horrible human being in the world. It's like, well, dude, maybe she really didn't even see what you were doing, John.
Yeah.
And I try to remember that, and that's where earlier I said I try to lead with love. That's what I mean. It's kind of like, well, what would a nice, thoughtful, generous human being do right here, John? Not what you would do.
Yeah.
And that's really, over time, it makes me feel a lot better to be thoughtful and kind and helpful than to, quote unquote, get what I want. I thankfully I've come to where I'm not sure why, but God, you can hear this one goes out to you, Mom. I find that more doors open for me metaphorically now than when I try to force my way through the doors. If that makes sense.
I'm sure more doors open literally too.
That's true, yeah. And there's usually other people holding them, going, "You gonna go through or not? Not gonna be here all day." Shake a leg, go. That's right. You're already shaking a leg. Anyway, so yeah, the humor's real, but yeah, I use it. I use it to mask my deep, unwavering pain.
Yeah. So I have a couple more questions, and I know it's probably been longer than I told you it was.
Oh no, I've
Um,
really enjoyed this. I don't open up as near as much as I should. No,
yeah.
really. You're again. This is like I'm kind of surprised about open and being. So you have one of those faces,
Well,
man.
thank you. You do as well. Um, what was there was three more things. One of them was the we talked about. I wrote it down, so I want to make sure I get it right. Um, the learned helplessness, like, and I guess the context in which we were talking about it reminded me a little bit of my dad and his cancer, because you were talking about how in the beginning of the Friedrich's ataxia, in the
Yeah.
beginning of the ataxia, you kind of were just like, well, I'm fucked. So like, you have to help me with everything to your
Well,
wife.
and to her credit, or eventually it hurt her, but me trying to be Mr. Honest, and it didn't even I didn't realize it for literally like 15 years. She would go, "Well, John, would it be easier if I got blank?" Well, the answer is yes. The answer is always yes. And so after a while, she didn't even ask. I
Mm,
didn't even try, and I didn't even realize it, nor did she, that she like became. She wasn't my wife anymore. We weren't partners anymore. I was another dependent,
mm,
and we both of us unconsciously kind of fell into the role. And let me make it very clear. If I was in her shoes, I'd feel the same way. After a while, she resented having to do everything, especially when she didn't really have to do everything. But when the question is, would it be easier if I did it? Well, yeah, it would be. Well, that's great, but you learn to where. And when I finally realized just how bad it had gotten, she had left, right? And now, I mean, we were, she was gone, wasn't going to come back, etc. A good friend of mine, who, ironic, her name is Julie also, we've been friends since we were 14. I had a neurology appointment, and I asked my friend Julie to give me a ride there. I didn't even know where my own neurologist was.
mm,
Guy I've been going to for 12 years
mm,
because Julie took care of that. Julie drove. I just sat and read or what have you. And I mean, we went to the wrong place because I didn't even know where. And that's where it's like, dear God, I have become beyond dependent. I learned helplessness. Just this entire. I I I felt sorry for myself, and that's not a good way to be. You know. And what I mean by that, I mean, don't be wrong. I mean, I'd prefer to be able to walk, etc. But I felt I didn't really resent other people, but I didn't try to make things better. I just kind of existed. I survived. I didn't try to thrive. I didn't try to enrich myself. It was like day after day, it was more or less the same. And I look back and I mean, I regret it for me, obviously, but I essentially regret it for Julie because we ended up to where she did everything, and I mean everything. She went to the store, she did all the cooking, she did all the cleaning. Um, and ironically, after a while, even if I would try to help, she would get irritated at me because I couldn't move fast enough. So it's a weird kind of thing where like I try to help make dinner, right? And she like, damn it, John, just let me do it. It's fine,
Mm.
fine. Because I'd be dropping stuff on the floor when I've you trying to help. It was like I felt like a 5-year-old trying to help mom cook dinner, and really all I was doing was making a mess. Except I wasn't 5; I was 40. And we never reconciled that, to be honest with you. And it's only now that I've been forced to be an adult again that I realize that wow, I always had it within my wherewithal to be a little more independent, and it really damaged our relationship for sure. And
Well, it's also just thinking about the situation with my dad and his girlfriend, I guess. They never married, but um, it was kind of how you described, where like my dad never wanted to just fully depend, even once he couldn't literally lift a spoon. But for her, it was, she felt so needed, and like this is my role, that it lowered her patience and all these things. And so it's like it's easy to say once you're forced into it, well, now sure you can cook dinner or whatever it is that you do. You could, which I was thinking, about how do you wash the dishes and stuff like that. But
very slowly.
yeah, but it's different when there's someone else that can move at normal speed,
Exactly.
because it's not just now about, all right, well, I'm going to let them do it because it'll help them build resilience and whatnot. It's like now I need to wait 35 extra minutes for my mac and cheese or
Right.
whatever
So,
it
so
is.
John can have that victory. You have to wait.
Right.
Great.
So it's not fully, I guess what I'm saying, at least it doesn't feel from my perspective like it's something I would fully put on you. Like, well, you allowed yourself to be fully dependent, which sounds like she was also getting something out of
Oh, very, very
that.
much. Well, you had in Mr. Arrogant, Mr. You need me more than I need you. Ha, no, I fucking don't. You know?
Yeah.
And hoist my own petard on that one. But yeah.
Yeah. Um, I wanted to ask you about, you said that your son is finally kind of asking you about, or not asking, but sharing about how he's felt, opening up to you and whatnot. How has it been for you to hear that, and how have you responded?
Um, it's a good question. Initially, it's been about 2 years. He's been we haven't talked for a number of months now, but initially I was super defensive, and I explained away all of it, and it wasn't until I realized it's like, John, answer this as a parent, not as a kid he was done wrong by his daddy,
Mm.
And that's why, because instead of going, man, I hear you, Mason. I can totally see how that hurt you. I'm sorry I did that to you. It was not a good thing. Instead, I'd go on for an hour about how it wasn't really that big of a deal. Let me just explain what I was thinking. Instead of just saying, I could have done that better. I'm sorry. Instead of that, I would give you an hour of reasons why that was the best I could have done, and you should be thankful for
Mm.
it. And the first few times we spoke, it was not good. Um, Actually, Julia's mom got kind of involved in kind of explain to me, because we're very similar. Big surprise, right? Me and my son. But over time, and he's real gun shy right now, which I don't like, but I understand. But at first, I didn't want to hear it, and I came up with valid excuses, valid not excuses, valid reasons Well, they really were kind of excuses after a while. It's like, and I think you'll know what I mean when I say this. It's like, my son didn't need to hear how bad it was for me growing up. He needed to hear that I was sorry when I made it hard on him.
Mm.
And I did, Nick. I mean, you know, I, you know, not perfection, but real close to it, right? I mean, that was the minimum was like, I'm not being totally fair of myself, but he could come on with a 98 on a calculus test, and I'd be like, what the hell? Why do you make 100? Well, you just lollygagging? You don't care anymore? It's like, dude, you made a 98 on an advanced calculus test. Tell the kid you're proud of them. Again, but well, that'll make them weak. I mean, absurd, right? But that's how I was taught.
And do you remember, like, can you go back into those memories when you would do that to him? Do you remember if there was a part of you that felt like guilt, or was it like fully like this is the right thing, or was there an ounce of like, oh, I wish I wasn't doing this, but I can't. It's just my nature.
It wasn't until later. I wish I could say, well, yes, there was a part of me that subconsciously was aware that there's got to be a better way to help my son, right? Unfortunately, I was absolutely convinced that I was on the right path, right?
Even after the moment, and you would go to your room or brush your teeth or whatever you were doing, there wasn't like a man, like, why did I talk to him that way?
There was, it's not funny you asked that, but it's interesting that you asked that because, yes, and I would almost immediately suppress it because that was me being weak. If I want to help my son, just be strong. No, what would have been more helpful is to be a well-rounded human being and have, as you were putting it, the layers. That Mason, it's okay to have contradictory thoughts or to be anxious or to be afraid. These are okay. I convinced myself that I would be doing him a disservice if I brought that up.
Yeah. So you had like a normal human response to a kind of unnatural human behavior, right? You're like holding your son up to perfection, and then once you're done with that interaction, there's a like very natural like, oh man, that's kind
That
of
was
me.
harsh. That was harsh, John.
But then immediately the programming comes in of like,
Exactly.
but that's gonna make him stronger,
Right.
so that you don't have to feel.
He might hate me now, but in 20 years he'll be thanking me. That's how I would justify it to myself.
Wow.
I try to live every moment to the fullest. I try to be very conscious of what I'm doing and why. I mean, and ironically, I feel almost selfish like going live music because that's for me. That's 100% for me. And I try to appreciate the moments. And I mean, it's bittersweet, obviously, but in some ways, there's not a huge difference. It's just everything's a hell of a lot more poignant, if that makes sense. Because it's like, yep, we're talking now. In 3 years, I might be dead. It's a weird. I'm not gonna make it till I'm 95. I mean, I might. But
yeah, you'll just be in the. You'll just be a chip in a computer at that point.
That's right. You're the sentence with that. No. God, trying to think, it was like the guy. It was
A TV show.
It was a TV show, but like they cut off heads of like Nixon and stuff. Yeah, but no, I try to live every moment of my life with what again. It sounds goofy to me, but I mean 100% with joy and love and just like there's I'm thrilled with this. It's like it's like well, dude, I made a connection with another human today. That's a good thing.
Right.
So no matter what else happens in my future, this happened, and this is a good thing.
Mm.
So I try to make my life be moments of transcendence, frankly, and I want it to really matter, man. But why? Because it does, and I just life is a glorious thing. I'm glad to be experiencing it. And even in a diminished way, it's like you were saying about with your dad, he can't swim, but he can walk. And oh, it's terrible, but it is a fact. And it is true that for me, I very much like being alive. I Thankfully, there's no like suicidal ideation or anything like that for me. I mean, don't get me wrong, I have my bleak moments, but nothing like that, right? And I just, try to live life to the fullest. And, sometimes that means like watching stupid TV slag jawed, but, that's okay too. I'm trying to believe it or not, I'm trying to make every moment transcendent while I cut myself some slack if they're not. Wow, it's 6:45. Actually, that house is an acre and a half, so I own you can't see the edge of the property.
Dang. Yeah, and you're on uncharted territory now.
All right. I'm used to it. No, and to my wife's undying credit, and the house was totally paid for. She left me with the house and everything in it. So that, I mean, obviously, legally 50-50, but instead she was like, no, John, I don't want to hurt you. I don't want to make your life hard. This is going to be horrible enough. I recognize that. Please take the house and all our stuff. And I mean, she took them. Her clothes, obviously.
It's a beautiful, beautiful yard.
Thank you. Is that everywhere, or?
Maybe by that bench